The Vikings fell on Europe like thunder in the mountains, and none of their names has resounded into the modern era as loudly as Ragnarr Lothbrok. The Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok is not a term for the entirety of stories about him, but for a specific story about him written in the Old Norse language in Iceland during the 1200s. This is the most important source for his life and legend that is actually preserved in the Old Norse language. And it is one of the main sources that is used by modern imaginative writers and makers of television shows in seeking information about that life and legend. The Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok begins not with Ragnar himself, but with the childhood of who will become his second wife, Aslaug. The saga actually begins as a sequel to another great saga of a Norse hero, the Saga of the Volsungs, which concludes with the death of the children of Gudrun, the wife of Sigurd, the greatest of the Volsung heroes and a great dragon slayer. According to the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, Sigurd had another child, a daughter named Aslaug, with the Valkyrie Brynhild, who he slept with in the Ring of Fire that Brynhild was cursed to inhabit after she, as a Valkyrie, killed the wrong man, disobeying Odin's orders. This child, Aslaug, was brought up in Norway by a poor family where she is denied her name. She's renamed Kråka, Crow, and any knowledge of her royal and heroic parentage. It is Ragnar who comes to her at this home in Norway and, desiring to marry her, tells her that she needs to pass a test of wisdom. In order to pass this test, she has to come to him on his ship, not clothed, but not naked, not fed, but not starving, and not alone, but with no person. So she comes to him, not fed, but not starving. She's eating an onion, so she's not exactly satiated, but she's also not completely starving. She comes to him not clothed, but not naked. She comes in a fishnet draped over her, with her hair draped over the fishnet so that it covers her, but she's not wearing any cloth or thread. And she comes with a dog, so she's not alone, but not with any person. And having passed this test of wisdom, Ragnar, who's also taken in by her incredible beauty, which the poor family that raised her as Kråka has failed to conceal by smearing her head with tar, Ragnar marries her. But Ragnar is too eager to have her on their wedding night, even though Aslaug tells him that she has a curse upon her, that if her husband is too eager to take her on their wedding night, that their child will have no bones. Sure enough, Ragnar is too eager. They consummate their marriage that night, and the child, who's born 9 months later, has no bones in his body, and he is known as Ivar the Boneless. Ragnar and Aslaug go on to have more children, including Bjorn Ironside and Hvitserk and Rognvald, and both the sons and Ragnar himself have numerous adventures. But eventually, Ragnar is persuaded by some of his men that he needs to not be married to this peasant woman, Kråka, anymore. She still never told him her actual name or her actual parentage. He still thinks that she's the daughter of the poor farmers that he found her with in Norway. And he arranges to marry the daughter of a Swedish king. But Aslaug finds out about this and tells him her true name, and as a token of the fact that she is in fact the daughter of Sigurd, a greater hero than has ever existed, their next child that she is pregnant with at the time is going to be born with a snake in his eye, as a symbol of the fact that his grandfather Sigurd was a dragon slayer, and so was Ragnar. Ragnar had killed a dragon in an earlier episode in his life when he won his first wife, Thora. The child is born with this sign, and he is named Sigurd Snake Eye, or Snake in the Eye, Ormur I Auga, literally worm in eye, but Old Norse uses the same word for worm, snake, dragon. And having been proven to be married to a woman who's actually more noble than the woman that he's engaged to in Sweden, Ragnar breaks off the engagement, and his two sons by his first wife Thora, Erik and Agnar, go to Sweden to avenge this insult on their dad, leading an army against the Swedes. But they are killed there by the Swedish army, which is protected by Sibylla, a magical cow that moos so fearsomely that an enemy army falls apart and attacks itself. And this causes Aslaug to change her name one more time. She changes her name now to Randalin, and to lead her sons and their army to Sweden to kill King Oystein of the Swedes and the magical cow that had killed Erik and Agnar. There are many more adventures in this saga, which concludes with Ragnar's interesting oath that he will conquer England with just 2 ships. He sails to England with just these 2 ships, but of course he is defeated by the English army, he is captured, and he is thrown into a snake pit where he is killed by venomous snakes, but not before uttering his famous last words, Geniðja mundu grísir ef galtar hag vissi. How the piglets would squeal if they knew the old boar's condition. These words are brought to his sons, who do in fact squeal, conquering England and killing the king of the English, according to the saga, Ella, who is a historical king of Northumbrian England, by committing the blood eagle on him. The blood eagle is a horrible torture in which a man's ribs are pulled out through his back one by one. This saga is, of course, not the only source of Ragnarr Lothbrok's life and legend from the Middle Ages. As I mentioned, it's simply the most important, and the most important that is written in the Old Norse language. Another important source is, of course, Saxo's Gesta Danorum, also written in the 1200s, but in Latin in Denmark. That's the source of, for instance, the wife named Lagertha, who is never mentioned in the Old Norse sources. Her name is, in fact, a Latinized form of an Old Norse woman's name, Hlaðgerðr. Let me make one thing clear about Ragnar's name, or 2 things clear about Ragnar's name. You'll see the second part of his name, Lothbrok, spelled 2 major ways in English, with a D and with a TH. That's because the 3rd letter in that name, as it's spelled in Old Norse, is an ed. And this is a letter that looks like a D with a slash through it, or a medieval curly D with a slash through it, but is pronounced TH, like in English, then, or there. Since many translators don't have that letter on their keyboard, or are not sure that readers are going to recognize that letter, they usually print it as a D, even though the pronunciation is closer to a TH. So different translators make different choices, and that's why you see it 2 different ways. Another thing to make clear is that Lothbrok is not his last name, but rather a nickname. It means literally shaggy pants, or even shaggy chaps, and this refers to a characteristic garment that he wears when he kills a dragon early in his career. The name would not be passed on to his children, nor would it be given to his wife. His proper last name from an Old Norse perspective is actually Sigurðarson, son of Sigurd, because his father is also named Sigurd. No relation to the dragon slayer Sigurd. His father is Sigurd Ring. And then Ragnar's own sons, their proper last name from an Old Norse perspective is then Ragnarson, so Ivar the Boneless, Ragnarson, Sigurd Snake Eye, Ragnarson, etc. I have recently translated the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok together with the Saga of the Volsungs, which it forms a sequel to, in 1 volume called the Saga of the Volsungs with the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. This appeared from Hackett Publishing Company in September 2017, and is the first time that these 2 sagas have been rendered in contemporary modern English by someone who is an expert in the Old Norse language. I hope you'll check it out, as well as my translation of the Poetic Edda, which is the major source for the myths of the Norse gods and heroes, as well as the other videos on this channel. This channel is a presentation of free material about Norse language, myth, and sagas, but I do have a Patreon page where you can help support my continued efforts to make this information available outside the ivory tower in accessible language. For now, from beautiful Colorado, where the first snow has fallen in the first days of October, I'm wishing you all the best.